The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of the Pine Tree Diner, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Sarah Miller wiped her brow with the back of her hand, the smell of coffee and bacon grease clinging to her faded blue uniform. At 28, she looked older, her eyes carrying the weight of dreams deferred and bills piling up on her small apartment table. "Order up," called Hank from the kitchen, his voice barely audible over the clatter of plates and the soft country music playing from the ancient radio. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she grabbed the plate. The doctor had been clear yesterday. Her mother's cancer treatment would cost more than she could ever hope to earn on Waitress tips, even with her second job as a night cleaner at the local high school. "You okay, honey?" asked Margaret, the owner of the diner, her weathered face creased with concern. "I'm fine," Sarah replied with a forced smile, the lie bitter on her tongue. "Hey there, before we continue with Sarah's story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heart-touching true stories like this one. Now let's get back to what happened that fateful morning at the Pine Tree Diner." The bell above the door jingled, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. An elderly man walked in, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a simple baseball cap. He moved with a quiet confidence, selecting a booth in the far corner away from the window. There was something familiar about him, but Sarah couldn't place it. Just another traveler passing through their forgotten little town of Pinecrest, Montana. Sarah approached the booth, notepad in hand. "Coffee to start?" she asked mechanically, not really looking at him. "That would be fine," the man replied, his voice a gravelly whisper that sent an odd shiver of recognition down Sarah's spine. She looked up briefly, meeting intense blue eyes that seemed to look straight through her. "I'll be right back with that," she said, hurrying away, the feeling of déjà vu unsettling her. Behind her, the man watched with quiet interest, taking in the small diner with its faded photographs of local landmarks and the Employee of the Month board, where Sarah's picture was displayed 3 months in a row. As Sarah poured his coffee, her hands shook more visibly. The man noticed but said nothing. The small TV in the corner of the diner played the local news, the reporter discussing budget cuts to the town's medical assistance program. "Just perfect timing," Sarah muttered under her breath, unaware that the man could hear her. "Trouble?" he asked when she returned with his coffee. Sarah started to give her automatic response. "No, everything's fine." But something in those penetrating eyes made the truth spill out instead. "They're cutting the medical assistance program that was helping with my mom's cancer treatments," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "Sorry, you didn't come here for my problems. What can I get you?" The man studied the laminated menu. "What would you recommend?" "The blueberry pancakes," Sarah replied without hesitation. "My mom's recipe. Margaret lets me make them special on Thursdays." "Then that's what I'll have," he nodded, handing back the menu. His fingers were calloused, the hands of someone who'd worked hard all his life. As Sarah turned to leave, the man spoke again. "My wife had cancer," he said quietly. "Pancreatic. She fought like hell." Sarah stopped, turning back slowly. The simple statement, delivered without pity or condescension, broke through her carefully constructed walls. "My mom's fighting too," she whispered. "But I don't know how much longer we can afford the fight." The diner had begun to fill with the usual morning crowd. Local factory workers, a few tourists, and Mr. Peterson, who came every day for his scrambled eggs and toast, always leaving a exactly $1.25 tip. Sarah hurried to take orders, pour coffee, and deliver food, but she found her eyes continually drawn to the quiet man in the corner booth. He ate methodically, scanning a local newspaper someone had left behind. Occasionally he would look up and observe the interactions around him, his gaze lingering on a young family struggling to keep their children seated. The father's face lined with exhaustion, but brightening whenever his kids laughed. When Sarah brought his check, he asked, "Been working here long?" "Since high school," she replied. "Going on 10 years now." "You like it?" The question caught her off guard. No one ever asked if she liked waitressing. "It's a job," she answered automatically, then paused. "Actually, I love the people. Not the work so much, but the people make it worthwhile." The man nodded as if she'd confirmed something important. "What would you do? If you could do anything?" Sarah laughed, a brief, bitter sound, Finished college. I was studying nursing before Mom got sick. Had to drop out 2 years in. Nursing, he repeated thoughtfully. Noble profession? Sarah shrugged, embarrassed by his intensity. Just a dream now. As she walked away, she heard him call after her. Sometimes dreams find their way back to you when you least expect it. The words hung in the air, oddly prophetic. Sarah shook her head, dismissing them as the kind platitudes strangers sometimes offer when they glimpse someone else's hardship. The man paid his bill, a $10 tip on an $8 meal, and left quietly, the bell jingling his departure. Sarah watched him go, still unable to shake the feeling she should know him from somewhere. Later that afternoon, as Sarah was finishing her shift, Margaret called her into the tiny office behind the kitchen. "Did you notice who was sitting in your section this morning?" Margaret asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "The older man? Baseball cap?" Sarah replied, confused by Margaret's barely contained energy. "Sarah, that was Clint Eastwood," Margaret exclaimed, turning her computer monitor to show a news article. "He's in town scouting locations for his new film. His picture's all over social media already." Sarah stared at the image on the screen, recognition finally dawning. "That's why he looked familiar," she whispered, remembering her father's collection of Eastwood films they'd watched together before he left them when she was 12. Her father had always said, "That man doesn't just act, he tells the truth with his eyes." "And you had no idea?" Margaret asked incredulously. "No," Sarah admitted, feeling strangely embarrassed. "We just talked about normal things." She didn't mention their conversation about her mother, feeling it was somehow private. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work to find an envelope with her name written on it in a strong, slanted hand. Inside was a business card for Eastwood's production company with a handwritten note. "Come by the Pinecrest Hotel at 2 p.m. today. Might have something for you. C.E." Sarah's heart pounded as she showed the note to Margaret, who practically pushed her out the door when her shift ended at 1:30. "You can't be late for Clint Eastwood," she insisted. The Pinecrest Hotel, the only hotel in town worthy of the name, loomed ahead as Sarah approached, her palms sweaty and her mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps they needed extras for the film, or maybe temporary catering staff. Either way, the extra money would be a blessing. At the front desk, she nervously stated her name. To her surprise, she was immediately escorted to a conference room where several people sat around a large table covered with papers, coffee cups, and laptops. Eastwood was at the center, looking much more like the movie star she should have recognized yesterday. "Ah, Miss Miller," he said, rising to greet her. "Thank you for coming." Sarah nodded, words failing her as all eyes turned in her direction. "I'll get straight to the point," Eastwood continued. "We're filming a movie about a small town dealing with the closure of its main employer. One of our key themes is healthcare in rural America." He gestured to a woman beside him. "This is Dr. Eleanor Chen, our medical consultant, but also the head of the Camden Medical Research Foundation." Dr. Chen smiled warmly at Sarah. "Mr. Eastwood mentioned your situation," she said, "and your interrupted nursing education." Sarah shot a questioning glance at Eastwood, who shrugged slightly. "I listen," he said simply. "Our foundation has a program specifically designed for students who had to abandon healthcare studies due to financial hardship," Dr. Chen explained. "Full scholarships, living stipends, and guaranteed placement after graduation. We focus on candidates who will return to serve in rural communities." Sarah's mind struggled to process the words. "Are you saying—" "We'd like to offer you one of our scholarships," Dr. Chen confirmed. "You can resume your nursing studies next semester." Sarah's knees weakened, and she gripped the back of a chair for support. "But why me?" she whispered, unable to comprehend the sudden turn of fortune. Eastwood's eyes, those truth-telling eyes, met hers. "Yesterday you served me breakfast without recognizing me, without special treatment. You were kind despite your own troubles. Then I watched you with every customer after me. The same attention, the same care." He leaned forward slightly. "But what really decided it was when that young family couldn't afford their full breakfast. I saw you pay the difference from your tip jar." Sarah blushed. She hadn't realized anyone had noticed. "Character," Eastwood said simply. "Can't teach it. Can't fake it." He gestured around the room. Our film aims to show the struggles of real Americans in forgotten towns. But what good is telling these stories if we don't do something concrete to help? Dr. Chen handed Sarah a folder. All the information is in here. The foundation will also provide special assistance for your mother's treatments. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll finish your degree, Eastwood replied. Say you'll become the nurse this town needs. I will, Sarah promised, her voice breaking. I absolutely will. What happened next spread throughout Pinecrest like wildfire. The production company didn't just offer Sarah a scholarship. They established a healthcare fund for the entire community, inspired by her story. The film crew became a common sight around town, with many locals hired as extras or support staff. Sarah's mother's treatments began showing promising results, and by the time production wrapped 3 months later, she was in remission. Sarah enrolled in the nursing program at the state university, driving home every weekend to check on her mother. But the most profound change wasn't just in Sarah's life. It was in how the town viewed itself. Pinecrest had been dying slowly, its young people leaving, its spirit fading. The film brought not just temporary economic relief, but a renewed sense of pride and possibility. 1 year later, at the local premiere of the film, titled Invisible America, Sarah sat beside her mother, watching as their town story unfolded on screen. The character based on her, played by an up-and-coming actress, delivered a line that made the entire theater turn to look at the real Sarah. Sometimes a person's worth isn't measured by who they recognize, but by who they help when no one is looking. After the screening, Eastwood approached Sarah and her mother. How's nursing school? He asked without preamble. Challenging, Sarah admitted, but I love every minute of it. And the treatments? He asked, turning to Sarah's mother. Still in remission, she replied, squeezing his hand gratefully. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it. Eastwood shook his head. Don't thank me. Your daughter's the one who earned this. I just recognized what was already there. As they parted ways, Sarah called after him, echoing his words from that first morning. Sometimes dreams find their way back to you when you least expect it. Eastwood turned, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. And sometime, he replied, the person serving your coffee is the one who reminds you why those dreams matter in the first place. Today, Sarah Miller Chen, she married Dr. Chen's son 2 years later, runs the nursing program at the newly established Pinecrest Medical Center. On her office wall hangs a framed napkin from the Pine Tree Diner with the words, character, can't teach it, can't fake it, written in that same strong, slanted handwriting. When new students ask about the napkin, Sarah tells them this story, not to boast about meeting a famous actor, but to remind them that compassion shown when no one is watching can sometimes change not just one life, but an entire community. And in the Pine Tree Diner, now renovated but still serving Margaret's coffee and Sarah's mother's blueberry pancakes, a simple photograph hangs beside the cash register, Sarah and Clint Eastwood at her nursing school graduation. Beneath it, a caption reads, "Be kind to everyone you meet. You never know who's sitting in your section." If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more real-life encounters that remind us all of the power of kindness and recognition. Share in the comments below your own experiences of unexpected kindness from strangers, because sometimes the greatest changes begin with the smallest acts of humanity